All right, so today I am 955 days sober. So it's 2 years, 7 months, and I think 12 days, something like that. Longest I've ever been sober. No booze, no alcohol, no drugs. Nothing that takes me outside of my own self. And that's a great feeling. A lot of you guys who have been following me over the last 5, 6, even 7 years would know that I struggle with alcohol and drug abuse, right? It's no secret. I've broadcasted that on all of my social media platforms. Once I started my YouTube recently, I was like, I'm going to build this around my life and fitness, but sobriety is such a big one. So I think it's time for me to actually tell you guys how I ended up in rehab in 2020. All right, so I was brainstorming over the last few weeks. I did a little Q&A on my Instagram of what answers you guys want to know, right? So I have some good questions, but we'll get onto that. But I'm basically going to tell you guys how it happened, right? Before rehab, during rehab, post rehab, like Love Island, and how it brought me up to where I am today, a little over 2.5 years sober. Because obviously I went to rehab in 2020. If I stayed sober from 2020, I'd have a little over 5 years now. And the reason I wanted to do this video now and every February is because that's when I went into rehab. So it's coming up on like this day today, 5 years ago, I was in rehab in Ireland. So I want to tell you guys, right, my drinking, right? So I come from a family of big drinkers, but we're very, very much built on music, sports, and drinking, right? That's how we grew up. A lot of Irish people would be the same. I'm going to use words like alcoholism and drug addict and stuff like that. And now these are words that were hard for me to understand and to accept at the start of my drinking. But these are words that are thrown around in recovery, and I'm able to accept them as well. So I will explain what they mean to me. And because if there's people watching this, I don't want to scare people away, right? Because sobriety has been the best thing ever that's happened in my life. And honestly, I probably wouldn't be alive if I wasn't sober, and that's the God's honest truth. So I'll always start when I was 20, 21, 22, right? So I was a rugby player. I stopped playing rugby at 22, and that's where the discipline in my life that I had throughout my teenage years in schools and rugby started to decrease. I started working out more, but I started partying even more. I started dabbling in drugs that I'd never done before. I started smoking weed. I started doing MDMA and Molly. I started doing coke, and then I moved to New York in 2016. When I'm telling my sobriety journey, right, I always mention this because it had an effect. Wolf of Wall Street came out, I believe, in 2014 or 2015, and I remember watching a movie, and it was all pills and coke, and I'd only done cocaine a couple of times in Australia, but I knew New York and America was a place that people did cocaine. It was just easy access to get. So I decided to move to New York. Long story short, I got into the bar scene. I got into nightclubs, and this is where people might think, because I was known for being a nightclub promoter for 3.5 years. A lot of people think it was because I was a nightclub promoter that I became an addict, whereas in fact, I was doing so much coke before I even stepped into a nightclub, and that's the God's honest truth. When I moved to New York, I was doing so much coke, it wasn't even funny. It was on a weekly basis. There wasn't a week where I actually didn't do coke. It's kind of scary when you think about it like that. So I got into that scene, right? And that just fed me everything I was looking for, right? It was just everything I was dreaming about watching that movie, Wolf of Wall Street, cocaine, nightclubs, everything that came with it. I knew I had a problem early on because a lot of the times when I had my first few drinks, I was always looking for coke. It came hand in hand. When I woke up the morning after a night out, if I had done coke, I was actually surprised. I'd be surprised. I would be happy because I would have got a better sleep, but I would be itching and excited for the next time I went out, which could have been that night or that weekend following, because I wanted to get coke. So, it led me into the nightclubs. And obviously I started getting casting for reality shows. I'm not going to go down Love Island, right? I want to keep this mainly about sobriety, but Love Island was a part of that. My stint on Love Island and leading up to Love Island was the most sober I had been, because I knew I was going on TV. We were told we were being drug tested, but even a couple of weeks before my drug test, a week before my drug test, I actually had done cocaine at an after party. I hadn't done coke in probably 2 months. It was the longest I stopped doing coke for, obviously, when I started doing it. But that's how much of an addict I was. I couldn't stay off of it long enough for a fucking drug test to go on a reality TV show that potentially what I thought at the time was going to change my life. So we're up at Love Island, which is 2019. I'm in pretty good shape, physically, mentally though, and emotionally very, very weak. And I came out of a toxic relationship, went into a reality dating show, came off the reality dating show, and that 6 months from Love Island to Ireland, which I went back to Ireland, was the worst 6 months of my life. I broke my bank account. I broke relationships, friendships with my family, my friends, people who were looking out for me. I was in a state of paranoia. I couldn't sleep. I lost my job in nightlife because I was working with my friends and they had told me I was not able to work in nightclubs. That's how bad I was. You got to think, being a nightclub promoter, you're going to a club at 10 p.m, you finish at 3 or 4. It's not really a full-time job, is it? You're just rocking up, you're bringing in people to clubs, you're partying with them. I couldn't even do that because I couldn't be seen. I'll give you a little story. I rocked up to one of the biggest nightclubs in New York and I was friendly with the doorman and he basically just looked me up and down. I had coke on my nose and he was like, "What are you doing?" I was so skinny. I'd lost 25, 26 pounds in the space of a month and a half. And my clothes were falling off of me. And I got into a state of paranoia that I rarely left the apartment only to go down and get my drugs. And for whatever reason, and people might laugh at this, I used to be obsessed with cleaning my apartment when I was high because I'd be just doing, because I needed to pay. So that was the state of paranoia I was in. So yeah, that brings me up to the start of 2020. My brother had actually flown over to New York to fly me back because I called my mom. I told her what was going on. I was terrified. I was suicidal. And that was kind of the start of my recovery. So I kind of ran through those years from 2016 to 2020 very fast, but it was progressive. There was times where I knew I had a problem. There was times when I didn't have money to get coke, but I still ended up getting coke. So I knew I was an addict. I Googled one night at home, high as a kite, characteristics of a drug addict. And every single fucking one of them I could relate to. And that's when I was absolutely terrified because I knew I didn't want anyone knowing and I knew I couldn't do it alone. This brings me to rehab, and this was actually one, I got asked a lot of questions about rehab. What was it like? Long story short, and not a lot of people know about this, but I was in touch with Love Island, which is actually run by CBS, and I was in touch with a therapist, and basically they covered the expenses for rehab. My parents were going to pay for it. I was broke, I had no money, but I decided to reach out to someone who was on Love Island. He was a friend of mine. He put me through to the therapist. The therapist got through to CBS. And because there was a pattern of mental health issues with contestants on Love Island in the past and previous reality shows, they covered the expenses. The expense for rehab was probably 5,000 or 6,000. I had actually gone into an outpatient a facility in New York, and I remember looking at the prices of rehab in America, and it was like 20,000, 25,000. I knew it was inevitable that the time was coming that I had to go back to Ireland. So my brother flew over to Ireland, flew me back. I thought it was the end of my life. I thought it was the end of the world. That was it. I'm back in Ireland. I wasted 4 years in New York trying to build myself up, my profile, everything like that. Went on a reality show. I thought it was all down the drain. Little did I know that I was actually the start of my recovery and the start of a new life. Rehab was 30 days. It was a 30 days inpatient program, no phone. I remember bringing in a tub of protein because I lost so much weight. I wanted to put weight back on. They took me off that. So it was very strict, very regimented, a lot of writing, a lot of talking, a lot of working out and getting to the issue. Why was I drinking and doing so much drugs? And long story short, like, I'm an alcoholic. I have the disease, right? Because it essentially is a disease. I think it is hereditary, which means it's on both sides of my family, which it is. And I just got the lucky coin, which I call it the lucky coin now. You know, I got the lucky draw, the lucky straw, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, that was my journey into rehab. But it was a very strange time in my life. You know, I just came off a reality dating show, which was one of the biggest dating shows in the world, and then I'm in rehab. So I was terrified. I didn't tell a lot of people. Told my close friends I was going home, but it was the start of the pandemic, and I built up 5.5 months of sobriety. I relapsed pretty bad. I relapsed in my back garden with 3/4 of a litre of vodka. I ended up in hospital. So a lot of people don't know that, and I'm sharing this because it's important to be vulnerable so that people might relate to it and know that, okay, this does happen to other people as well, So, and then I got a year and a month after that relapse, and my father passed, and I actually took this dating show in the UK because I knew I was going to be able to drink there with no one that knew me. So relapse is a part of my story. It's just a part of my story. It's a part of a lot of people's stories who are in recovery. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't recommend it, but for me, I learned a lot about myself in those relapses because I knew for me, I'm like, I cannot do this anymore. I just simply cannot do this anymore. I made sure after that relapse, I went back to New York. I told no one I relapsed. I told no one because I built up a year and change of sobriety. I looked healthy. I had money in my bank account. I went back to New York, and it went from bad to worse there because I was putting on this persona to everyone that I was sober, but I was sneakily going out and drinking. And what happens when I drink? The cocaine comes out, and that's what happened. It was a recipe for disaster. I was going to the same places, the clubs, the late bars. I was hanging out with people who were friends. There was nothing wrong with them, but I was making friends with guys that I could go out with. I could get into any club in New York because I previously worked in these clubs. So there was just that pattern was coming back again. In those 5 months I was out, I went broke again. I had no money. I invested all my money into my fitness app, which I have still to this day. And I blew the rest on booze and coke. And that was it. I flew over to Australia for my brother's wedding. My mother knew something was up because I didn't look good. I was drinking heavily in Australia whenever I could. But that brings me on to my last day of drinking, which was at my brother's wedding in Australia. Or actually the more specific drink I had my last drink at the airport on the way back. And I said to myself, I was like, this is the last drink. I was training a guy who was, he's still one of my good friends. He's an older gentleman, very successful business guy. He's sober probably a little over 12 years now. And he had called my bullshit when I went back and trained him. He said, I know you're not sober. We need to get you back in the community and get you sober. So that was basically from my New York, my first drug in Australia to my last drink and drug in New York or Australia, but that journey that kind of brought me to the start of my partying days all the way up to my last drink. And we are here today, but I do want to mention my 1 year sobriety because that's a big one. I've done it twice. It's a huge milestone, right? The 30, the 60 day, the 3 months, 6 month mark. Every day that you stay sober is unbelievable. Whether, if you have a problem, I'm not saying everyone has a problem. Ideally, people watching this who have a problem, or even if they don't have a problem, I guarantee you they know someone who is struggling. So that's the whole point of this video as well, just to reach people who may want or need to hear this. That, my dark days were behind me, but I can't forget about them because, I got to keep it in today, but I also use my days where I was struggling as motivation to realize, okay, I'm actually in a really good place today. Not everything is perfect, but nothing needs to be perfect because it allows me to strive to progress and be better. The emotional side of things in sobriety and recovery is very difficult. It's very difficult. A lot of cravings early on. I'm lucky enough today that I don't have any cravings, but it doesn't mean my emotional side of my recovery is 100%. I'm in a new relationship now. It's the first thing. I moved all the way across the States from my girlfriend Johnny. I've never been able to do that before. So these are the gifts of sobriety. But not every day is easy as well, and that's very important. Very important to get that across as well, because a lot of people think, oh, when you're sober, everything's going to be perfect, but it's not perfect. there's a lot of sayings in sobriety, like easy does it, one day at a time, let go, let God, all these little sayings that help me in early recovery. And the most important thing is the people in recovery. I have an uncle on one side of my dad's family. I have two of my aunts who are sober. I have friends in who are sober as well. And even when I moved to Arizona, I still have people I can call, right? So that's one thing. One thing I found when I was, and this is one of the questions actually, one thing I found when I was getting sober, I thought I was way too young. Like I went to this sober community thing when I was 25, and I just thought, like, what am I doing here? I was 25 or 26. I was like, I'm way too young. And it took me so long to accept that I had an alcohol and drug problem, even though all these bad things were happening in my life, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to me, to people around me, all my relationships. It was just like so repetitive, but it took me so long to realize that I was the problem. It wasn't anyone else. I was so good at pointing fingers and blaming everyone, whereas I had to take the responsibility of my own doing. So that brings me up to today, guys, but I'm gonna do a little Q&A. These are just a little post I did on Instagram. But, you know, first one, what kind of drugs were you doing and how often were you doing them? So it just depends on the time of my life. My very first line of drugs was MDMA, which is Molly. Crazy, like who snorts that? But that's what I was doing. But it was mainly cocaine, alcohol, Adderall for a little while as well, and weed. The Adderall came into play because my drug dealer had it, and I heard about the drug because kids in college in America would use it to concentrate and study for their exams. So I actually got given it one morning, one brunch I was doing in this club called Lava, and I didn't sleep a wink. I was up all night doing coke. One of the guys said, this person over there has Adderall, I'll give it to you. And it was like that movie for, Limitless with Bradley Cooper, where everything is so clear and you're hearing different people's conversations. That's how I felt. So I was like, I'm going to do this. And I got addicted to that. So it was Adderall. It was cocaine number one, Adderall, alcohol, weed. So yeah. So this is a good one. Is there one particular thing that started you or led you to addiction and then get clean the last time? So there was plenty of moments where I knew I had a problem, but I always call it the push-pull. I would always push people away and pull them back in when I felt that everything was forgotten about. So if something happened one night, I'd leave it a while until I go hard again. So I was very good at hiding my addiction. If I drank 7 drinks, I was telling people I was drinking 2. If they asked me, was I high? I told them I haven't done coke in weeks, you know. So it was a cycle like that. But the suicidal thing that came in, you know, I had attempts and thoughts, plenty of thoughts of killing myself. And I found myself on the ledge of a window one night, and my friend pulled me back in, and I had an incident in an apartment on the Upper East Side one night. And you know, I'm very, very lucky that nothing happened, but I did try, and I had plenty of thoughts with the suicide. So that's how I got really scared as well, that I was going to take my life. So okay, so what happens to you continue to stay away from temptations? This is a good question. So sticking with a sober community, talking to people, meditation's a big one. Working out is massive. Keeping in touch with my close friends and family as well. So these are people who have been there for me through the years. So that's a good one. Do you still have contact with people you were in treatment with? No. I did see one guy. I ran into him when I was back for one of my mates' wedding in Spain. Me and Johnny went to Ireland, and I was working out with one of the guys, and I met a guy who I was in treatment with, and he seemed to be doing great. But no, other than that, do I have any regrets? I guess no, because I don't know. I went this way or that way. Like, would I still be here in the same position in my life? Who knows? Because, like, I definitely am a believer, like, you know, everything happens for a reason, and even my relapses and everything that I did and people that I hurt and the trust that I lost in people. I was very lucky. I had a good circle of friends, like, that I grew up with. My family, like, I was very, very lucky. A lot of people in recovery and addiction, like, they have no one. They've lost everyone through their actions. So I was very fortunate that I had a good group of people around me who could help me with that as well. So, but do I have any regrets? I don't think so. Biggest lesson through addiction. Oh, there's so many. I guess like the biggest lesson is I can't drink or can't drink or drug anymore. That's the biggest lesson. I can't do it. I'm powerless over that. You know what I mean? Once I pick up a drink or drug, something bad is going to happen. It might not happen there and then. It might not happen for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but something bad is going to happen to me mentally, physically, emotionally. All right, what else have we got here? How to deal with dating when they query, why don't you drink? This is a big one, right? So I'm very lucky. I'm in a relationship with my girlfriend, Johnny. She doesn't drink. That wasn't the reason why we started dating, but that's a big, big plus for our relationship. So I would think when I first started getting sober, I was suggested that don't go on any dates. I went on a couple of dates and I didn't really enjoy them, so I stopped dating completely. And I think it's something that you gotta just be selfish enough and focus on yourself. Because look, like, if you're not ready to go on dates and if you find it hard going on sober dates, it just takes time. That's the simple answer. It just takes time. What is your sobriety date? So my sobriety date is July 12th, 2022. So as I said, 955 days sober, something like that. How does your time on Love Island affect you? So I have a therapist, right? I have had a therapist the last year. So I probably do one call a month with him. And recently we were talking about my time on Love Island, even though it was so long ago, but I felt like I had a lot of PTSD with it because I was struggling in that time of my life. And when I went into the villa, I realised that I knew I had a problem before that, but I was off the drink for a little bit and we were only given one drink a night. And I found it was a very stressful situation in there emotionally. Like, you're going on a show for love, but I didn't want to have a connection with any of those girls in there. So I found myself going out for cigarettes, and like, even my conversations, I found it so hard to have a simple conversation with the girls in the villa. The guys, not a bother, but I was very insecure, and I definitely had low self-esteem as well. Like, and that was just not a good recipe to be in that environment as well, where they expect a lot out of you, and I was just exhausted. So that's why when I came out of the villa, I really went self-destruction mode and was just drinking and drugging myself into oblivion. So I'll just finish with this, guys. You know, it's one of those videos that I could keep talking about this, but I didn't want to keep it too long, guys, because I wanted to give enough value to people out there on my journey, and hopefully if you know someone this might resonate with, send it on to them. If you're someone who has resonated with stuff that I'm talking about, please reach out to someone, whether it be a family member, a partner, a friend. The main message I want to get across here is do not be afraid of addiction and recovery, because if you're addicted to alcohol or drugs, as hard as that is, it's going to lead you onto a road of recovery, and your life will completely change. Like, it will completely change for the better, and it just takes time. Reach out to me on Instagram or reach out to someone, and just know that you're not alone, and it does get better, and it's just going to be one day at a time, and there's going to be a lot of patience and acceptance and willingness in this. But my life has changed, and honestly, I have such a beautiful life, and it's all down to handing it over, and accepting the help off other people. And as embarrassed as I was, I absolutely love being sober, and that's the main message I want to get across, that sobriety is absolutely beautiful. Even if you don't have a problem, give it a go. Give it a go. Your life will change. So guys, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate everyone who's gotten this far. I just wanted to film and be vulnerable and kind of share my experience with you, and hopefully that you'll get something from this, guys. So have a good day, and subscribe and like and drop a comment if you enjoyed this video. All right, guys, see you on the next one.